we're going to get very deep tonight. We're going to get into subject matter that may be somewhat trepidous to some, and you're going to hear some comments that are going to be way out. You're going to hear some suggestions that may be way out. Having talked with some of you individually, what I used to consider way out now is commonplace, because many of you are already dealing with the thoughts of aliens and interfacings here and all kind of genetic splicings. So although at one time this lecture was phenomenal, I think now it's just run-of-the-mill. It's just something else that would be good to have in your arsenal to oppose or to understand that either threatens you or that intends to work with you. I make no bones about the contents. I simply say it's as I research it and I give it to you in the same way. We're going to start off with the woman lecture, and that's because women run everything anyway, right? Yeah. How many say women run everything? Don't you even do it? I didn't want to see those hands. You started to raise the hands up too. I saw you. Let's just say that probably some of the most interesting products and subjects on this planet are women. Isn't that a terrible way to address the female gender? But you are, if you're a female, simply because females, I think, are the worst critics of other females on earth. They would tear a man apart, but then they'll give some reason for why that woman made him like that, or the lack of a woman made him like that. But when it comes to interaction with each other, it can get to be terrible. Hopefully some of that is changing, but as you will see tonight, there are some times when you do, if you're a female, ally with each other. You do come together as one in the face of some things that men might say or do, O.J. Simpson excluded. What I'm going to say is simply this. The time we're living in is a time when knowledge and hopefully wisdom will be manifest. Without true understanding, it's impossible to manifest complete wisdom, because it'll be somewhere there a lack of knowledge. I let the chips fall where they may. I did some research, and in the dictionary it stated that woman was an adult female human being. I don't think we've got any problem with that at all. Is anyone have a problem with that definition? All right, we're together at least at the start. It says that womanhood was a time or condition of being a woman. It makes sense to me. I don't think it's a big deal there either. We may have an interesting interface with this one, because it said that girl was a female child or a young unmarried woman, or at one time that the word girl meant young boy. That one kind of grabbed me. I had to do some other references. You know, when you get to your third Ibid definition for whatever the original was, I said, that's interesting. It's going to become even more interesting as we move on. I look biblically because I find many people feel that they understand the Bible and feel that whatever is in the Bible is adequate and true. And so consequently it's stated there that the rib from Adam was created to give man a helpmeet, which was referred to as woman. Created from Adam's rib to be a helpmeet to man. I didn't know if that meant helpmeet to bills, or if it meant helpmeet somebody at the train station or what, but it did say helpmeet. I'm sure you have a better interpretation of that than I, but in my ignorance I questioned what that was. With all of that around, I then began to look even deeper into the phenomenal set of cells and set of personality and spirit that is a female. And I found this, which I know all of you will agree to, that woman is indeed, bless her heart, the weaker sex. That woman is in general, again, a prime example of what womb man can be, and that, of course, men are obviously much smarter than women, but because of the brain structure, but we still try to be compatible. Do you have any problems with any of those last three statements? A lot of problems. Why did I think that some women may have that problem? Are there any men with any problems with what I just said? One man. Well, you don't count. You're just one man with a problem. Okay? All the rest of the men did not raise their hands. All right? I used to say that because he wants you to buy his tapes. That's all. I know what it is. Well, I think I can give you proof, even though I said that, and it may be an exaggeration, but if you can back up an exaggeration, it may become a truth. So let's see if I can back that up. I want you to listen carefully now before you pass judgment, because I'm now going to show you why I said that. I think you may even agree with me at the end. Maybe not. Throughout the world, there are more widows than widowers. There are more women 100 and over than there are men 100 and over. The female body, on a worldwide racial consideration, retains the characteristics of youth longer than males do. Less, or at least fewer women, have hardening of the arteries. Most women, again, have a tendency to adjust blood pressure a little bit quicker than men, and faster if you would. And that the incidence of ulcers is much lighter in women than in men. Let me say, however, that's changing as women are beginning to develop ulcers, and I can't understand why, on a per capita ratio by state in the United States, up to 60% as fast as men. There's more heart failure and apoplexy in men than there is in women. And when it comes to retaining breath and using oxygen, women are much less easy to suffocate and can retain that ability longer than men. Women can endure cold weather on a general basis better than men. And in higher altitudes where there's 18% less oxygen, and of course they don't know about our oxygen products, women survive much better. Women who live in the Andes Mountains, and of course all women must live in the Andes Mountains, can carry heavier loads than men because the oxygenating capacity being stronger, the muscle texture and tenure is better. Just as I'm going about halfway through this, I guess you can begin to see how I'm supportive of my original premise and statement. You do see how I'm backing this up, right? How many agree that I'm backing it up? No. Well, I think I'm doing a good job at backing this up. Let me go on. Maybe I haven't said enough. Let's just let me go on with this a bit. The female brain not only has a finer texture and has a more complex organization than that of the man, but relative to overall body weight, it is 1/4 heavier. Particularly like that. But there are fewer females, well, that's not true, baby miscarriages than there are boy or male baby miscarriages. Let me repeat that, because that's a statistic that I don't have all the percentiles on, but it is a fact. Fewer women coming to term have a loss of a child, again, to whatever the miscarriage reason again, that is a child, girl child, than that is a boy child. They carry more girls to term successfully than boy babies to term. During childhood, the female is mentally superior to males. The female also has a larger thyroid gland, which has 3 lobes, to the male's 2-lobe gland. You must remember that, because it's going to have a very important bearing when we really get heavy here. Now, and also, as I promised you, there would be 3 glands, secret glands of females. That is one that has been misquoted or not properly given its place, is the 3-lobed female thyroid gland versus the 2-lobed male thyroid gland. The girl of 7, because of high, rich thyroid hormones, again, thyroxine, has a brain capacity that a boy does not get until he's nearly 14. That is double the age. A brain capacity that a boy child does not get until past puberty at 14. Strong mental and physical women conceive girl babies almost all of the time. And in fact, I would say almost, as we will see, that 99% of all original zygotes are female when formed. Now, with all of that, and of course I have proven without a shadow of a doubt all of the things that I stated and stressed at the beginning, right? Right. And as a man, it makes me feel much better to say that I have backed that up, even if I haven't. The whole point is that the ladies, the women, seem to have a lot on the male body and the male brain up until a certain thing begins to happen. Then most of the things that I have talked about begin to reverse, and the problem starts with the word men. The word is menstruation. Menstruation. I didn't say menstruation, I said menstruation, or the menses. I will refer to it from this point on as the menses. Menstruating women lose calcium, thyroxine, iodine, phosphorus, lecithin, vitamin E, vitamin B1, 6, 12, 15, B2, magnesium, manganese, iron, copper, zinc. And some of this loss starts 2 weeks before the menses actually starts in what is called Leukoria. Now, just to say that may not make a lot of impact. It should. In case it doesn't, let me just explain a couple of those things that I mentioned. Calcium, for instance, not only in teeth and so, but stabilizes the nervous system throughout the body. Without calcium, the nervous system cannot function correctly. Phosphorus is found in all healthy, normal cells. Iodine, the lack of which, or overabundance of which, leads into what we call giganticism, or, even though it's not the master gland, it affects almost every gland from the throat down and a few from the throat up again. The growth and maintenance of the body through the growth and maintenance of the thyroid gland is a must. And, interesting enough, the thyroid gland tends to swell during menstruation. There's a reason for that. Science has also gone so far as to prove that the birth of congenital idiots increases as the iodine supply decreases, and a type of sea iodine, like that from dulse and kelp and these kind of sea plants and algae and lichen family, decrease. In this case, we've all been blessed because now when it rains, it pours. We all can go out and buy iodized salt. But understand, in many cases, the iodized salt is from a land-based consumption, and land plants are not as rich in chlorophyll, and therefore their mineral value does not have as much energy in them as does a sea vegetative. Now, we accept this concept of menstruation as being a thing that is done for the health of a woman, is decreed by nature since one is born female, and that's all it has to do with it. Let me state that that is not exactly the case. There are women throughout the world, even now, who do not menstruate, never did menstruate, and in the sense of a tribe or nation, have the profundity and propensity in generally to not menstruate. Most Hindu women do not menstruate. One of the last ones that was very much acclaimed and about her no need for such was Indira Gandhi. Most ancient African women did not menstruate. Belkis of the ancient Greek and Sappho of the ancient Greek and the oracles of the Delphi, who were all Grecian women that were replaced in half by men, keep that in mind, prophets, if you would, people who could look into the future and guide Grecian society, did not menstruate. Hypatia being just one of them again, Carina being another. The Amazon women, the Teutonic women, the female Gallic women, and the West African Watititas, the West African Bossimans, the Ndambis of the Congo. None of those women believed in menstruation, nor did their bodies mense or go through a menses. Why is it then that they become the exception? They also grow stronger, taller, have more psychic ability, and more ability to bring in new births successfully without a lot of drugs, and even in some cases, even herbals. They are stronger, and they do not menstruate. Obviously, again, if they brought in births, how is that possible since they did not undergo menstruation? We find that there has been a lot of misinterpretation from some so-called holy sacred books, and possibly a lot of purposeful, well, how can I put it, changings of what was taught at one time by the phylum and gender called men, heading up organizations such as churches and medical societies for certain purposes. Maybe that's a challenge that I should throw out. Maybe that's something that you won't accept. But let us continue to look into this whole idea again. Women have been told, and they have traced it back to biblical interpretation by many prophets, priests, ministers, and reverends, that it is unclean issue that was necessary, and that women should be ostracized from a society or tribe during the menses, and it was a sign of her uncleanliness. We've also been told that it is the breakdown of the uterine walls and endometriosis, being when the uterine walls is very affected, but the breaking down of the egg before it is fertilized. Consequently, this is why the issue is necessary. I state none of those things may be true, but I can state anything. It's not enough that I state it. It's the best that we begin to look even more and more into this whole subject matter, if you would. With the advent of monogamy, and in many cases the ancients were a very poly system growth, the church needed people to hold on to. It wanted a whole family, because not only then did this church become stronger in number, but also the tithing and the support was probably more ingrained. They also proffered this idea that a woman should be separated from the tribe or nation during this time, and that this was something to be frowned upon and was something that showed that woman was therefore less than man. I state it is not a cleansing process at all, and that only is it partially the deterioration of the female egg unfertilized. Not only do women undergo the menses, but there is a subject, and I hope again that you're adult enough to let me deal with these tonight. We're going to have a lot of fun here tonight, and you'll be able to discuss with me later on all that you would like. There is something called on the streets, again, the whites, scientifically called Leukoria. Leukoria, or the whites, is a catarrhal condition of the womb and an inflammation of the uterine lining, much as endometriosis starts there too. And I state it's one of the reasons that causes menstruation. During this phase, Leukoria, not menstruation, women suffer sometimes for 2 to 3 weeks prior to the start of the menses, which will continue sometimes for 2 weeks, and usually at the least 3 days. This means that the female is subject to a constant loss of very interesting blood plasma and fluids. Let me explain to some of you who think that it is smart to laugh at Leukoria and feel that it is not something that is detrimental. Let me tell you what's in some of the leukoria fluid prior to the menses or after the menses. The fluids lost in leukoria are composed of important vital substances such as lipoids, alkali lactates, natural sodium, potassium, sodium carbonate, calcium, and brain and nerve foods, highly rich in lecithin and phosphatidylcholines. The mucous corpuscles, again, present in leukoria are in reality not mucous corpuscles at all. They are what we call hemoglobin capable, simply meaning they are on their way to becoming red blood corpuscles capable of carrying oxygen, which, if you've been to any of these 2 lectures at all, I tell you, you don't get enough oxygen ever. It's almost impossible on this planet to get enough oxygen faced with the stress and hydrocarbons and radiation that we are. So all of these are potentially human blood cells, red hemoglobin capable, oxygenating, that is being lost before they can even be formed. And then comes the menses themselves. Any wonder that anyone, and since this is now the bane of the female, wouldn't be irritable, in fact dizzy, possibly anemic, and grow old and show the signs of old with gray hairs, wrinkled skin, and so even faster if you're losing this 4 to 5 weeks out of a 30 to 31 day period. And some women honestly do go through that. I hope you don't know any of them, and I hope you're not one, because they are a heck to be around if that's the case. And what can you expect? The person is actually losing hemoglobin on a regular basis, and before the cells can even be made, they're losing it. I state this is not a natural condition, and it is not my big ego that states this. I have done research on those who have done the research, and in the little bit of research that I have done, I have to agree with what these august doctors and medicine people have reached the term to understand. In addition, it is proposed that if a female could stop these things, both the Leukoria and the menses, for no more than at least 24 hours, and that after that is much too much, that a female could have the capability of producing and bearing a child through term without a male being around. There is in history, if you do the research again, a theory called the Ovist theory. It's spelled O-V-I-S-T. It's pronounced A-H-V-I-S-T. The Ovist theory, I state, was proven by a Professor Jacques Loeb of Stanford University back in the 50s, 1953 through 5. The Ovist theory states that the embryo develops from the egg alone and does not require spermatozoon in order to begin the promulgation of mitosis. In other words, a woman can impregnate herself and bring to term without a male being around, producing the male spermatozoon. The prevailing medical theory now is called epigenesis, and therefore I state through these other researchers that epigenesis is not proven necessary, and yet it is what everybody now in this heterogeneous makeup in the United States pretty much believes in. Also, however, this begins to propose some other proponents, which even if you might accept those, may not accept the latter one. It means that the female, if we're going to go by RNA DNA factor, was probably formed before the male. You cannot get a man from a man. You cannot get a woman from a man, but you can get a man from a woman, and you can get a woman from a woman. This is what I propose the old church heads had to change, had to delete from the books that talked about it, and had to delete from the book that you refer to as the Bible. For you see, males cannot reproduce themselves, and without females, the species phylum of man on earth as we understand him would not be in existence. And there was a time when that species was threatened. Okay. Now we get to the light stuff, or should I say, the heavier contention. Dr. Edward Bischoff, an MD, started what is called the modern acceptance of the theory of epigenesis. That was started in 1864, for those of you taking notes. 1854, for those of you taking notes. That means that the zygote and uterine development by union of sperm and egg is what Bishop's theory was. His theory has been accepted. It is only a theory. For centuries, people had believed in, and some people still do believe in, what is called Parthenogenesis. Parthenogenesis. And the ancient Parthenon in Greece was a product of a culture that believed in parthenogenesis, having been given to them by some ancients called Akkadians and Natufians, who believed in the parthenogenic receptor of the human egg, and that female was only one of the regenerators of that, and that when man fell, then the thought of epigenesis even occurred. Before that time, it was understood that complete cyclic birth for a God-man had to be parthenogenic. That was their belief. In the year 1955, 4 very prominent British doctors of medicine Dr. Stanley Balfour Lynn, Dr. Bernard Camber, Dr. David Wine Williams, and Dr. A.E. Moron all studied some 10 cases of virgin births and agreed that in some strange way, indeed, parthenogenesis had to have happened. The most famous study case was that of Emma Marie Jones. She was a German woman who became impregnated during the Blitzkrieg time in 1944 at Hitler's Germany. This happened at the height of the war, and this woman was encased, entombed if you would, in a castle. Fortunately, there was a stream underground and there were lots of canned provisions for over 15 months. She was found to have been in her 7th month of pregnancy when rescued. That has never been explained by the so-called medical sciences of this day, but was a common occurrence, especially under the stress of entombment in many ancient times. We'll look into that later too. If the obvious theory is to be even propagated and definitely accepted, then we must begin to see what kind of conceptuality brought this into being. How can we begin to say that this may have been the way? And what does this mean that the species of human on earth actually is? We see in studying classical history and into looking into what the ancients have said that a lot of different practices go on and a lot of different worships are coming about or are beginning to be dropped. The question has always been, and you've heard it posed before, which came first, the chicken or the egg? And I think the old axiom was, which came first, the chicken or the egg on the chick, or the chicken on the egg? I ask you for a vote. I want you to raise your hand if you believe, when I ask it, that the chicken came first, and then I want you to raise your hand if you believe that the egg came first, but I don't want you to raise both hands, nor do I want you to vote twice. Okay? If you believe that the first creature was the chicken and not the egg, raise your hand. Okay, roughly around 20 people. Please lower your hands. If you believe it was the egg, please raise your hand. Which way is it? Okay. About 31 people. How many didn't vote because you don't know which you don't want to be made a fool of, so you're just not going to commit? There you go, young troop. All right. That figures. All right. Fence centers, placaters, politicians. All right. Well, this obviously has to be the chicken. I mean, doesn't it? You know, what kind of doubt could there be that it's not the chicken? Especially since in 1975 at Stanford University, they connected a vibrational detective sensor to an unfertilized egg and got a rhythmic pulsating beat just like that of a human heart. That experiment has been repeated knowingly 230 times with the same results on an unfertilized egg. What is an unfertilized egg? Anyone real intelligent here, right quick? Yes. No rooster around. No rooster was there. Well, then what does that do about the chicken and the rooster? But then we said a chicken and an egg, huh? Not a hen and an egg, not a rooster and an egg, but a chicken and an egg. This would mean that possibly there was some kind of a life pulse in an egg generated by the female that did not receive fertilization. A life pulse. Obviously, then the thing would be, are there any other species in nature, plant, animal, otherwise, that could begin to substantiate that or show possibly the same kind of proclivity. How many have ever seen an acorn or cut an acorn in half? Just raise your hands briefly. Interesting enough, if you look at that acorn, there's an imprint right there where the seed should be. And in many cases, it looks like a full-grown oak tree. Or there's actually a formation before they begin to genetically mutate some of your acorns. When it grew naturally, what looks like a big oak tree, which showed where that little seed might grow and what it might grow into. Also, the silk moth, little lowly silk moth, reproduces itself without a mate. And in fact, if the moth mates, it cannot produce silk, and it dies soon after mating. A lowly aphid, some call it an aphid, I call it an aphid. Little old lowly bug, if you would, reproduces without a mate, and yet the phylum of man, supposed to be able to subjugate and conjugate with just about anything on earth, can't do such. The Egyptian, of course, a very non-essential, backward, non-pyramid building society, had a very interesting thing. They worship almost what is behind me on the wall, a scarab, which we refer to as the scarab beetle. Scarab is a very interesting creature. Has a 7-year cycle, and at that time, if it does not mate, it reproduces. If it does not mate, it reproduces. Up till that time, it's capable of casting off its skin, borning itself anew, and if it does mate, there is new reproduction, and that one dies, and the other one may carry a seed, which then has to be fertilized by another beetle. But if that chain doesn't start, the beetle does not need a mate for reproduction. Now that sacred beetle, the good luck charm of the scarabus, obviously now may grow in its meaning as to what they were trying to say to us and why they characterize a little insect as being strong and mighty. I give you food for thought. If, and I say this very much iffy, if the human species is the highest life form on the planet Earth, then isn't it strange that seeds, moths, aphids can do what humans cannot do if you believe in epigenesis only? I state since nature always shows by sign, and nature has nothing to hide from man, because man to nature is as a beetle to a planet, then maybe we should look at what nature has said and is saying. All of that simply leads up to a final, or maybe a commencement, idea of what and who we are as humans. And I state that the story that they didn't tell you, that is now beginning to come out in various books under the New Age concept, that is now beginning to surface in research centers and medical facilities throughout the earth, and they still will not share it in general with the public, with the laity either, was that this is a very old planet, and that when life forms even begin to resemble in any way what we now think life forms on earth should, that they were hermaphrodites or dual-seeded, that they were androgynous or androgens, having male and females on the same plant stem, and that's an interesting word too, as you shall see, and that at one time there were even Etherians or evanescent. In other words, there was no solid form human on earth, yet there was intelligent life in a form. Here's the way that story goes, and I move it carefully and slowly, and I will state you now, in the next 10 minutes it's going to get very rough, and if some of you feel that you cannot take this kind of digging, go back and buy some products from the back or from the table and close your ears. But if I just made you very hungry for what may be happening, then let me finish before you reach a conclusion. Let me state, and I'll try to deal with it as scientifically as possible. It's going to get to be very interesting. Woman was the first, that is, the first female sex creation that endured the cessation of the hermaphroditic state. In other words, it was that phylum, called now female, that endured again the dual-sexed seed, having two sexes in one. This original person, or this original species of human, dwelt in the heavens of earth, or what is called the etheric vibrations, a much faster vibration than that of the physical vibration. And as the atoms of the planet condensed, so did the atoms of this species condense in the lower heavens of earth. This condensation led to a lower and lower vibrational rate within the atomic structure of both the planet and the species that had lived in the heavenly essence of that planet, until both became fairly solid. Then the hermaphroditic tendencies, through what is called a coalescence of the chakra centers, changed to an androgenic conception. It's interesting also that the word androgynous means having male and female parts on the same plant cluster, but androgen has been named by men as being any substance that induces or strengthens masculine characteristics, such as a male sex hormone. How far have we come? Number two, when this advanced species during ancient earth times mated with animals of earth's origin, their coitus resulted in a new offspring, animal man. And the animal portion of their union followed the animal menses, which are governed by the moon, and at that time the earth took on a moon. They were then called human or animal men, lower vibratory creatures of the fallen heavens. 3. When this advanced species during ancient earth times mated with animals on earth, their coitus resulted in another fallen energy unit. And that was even fallen lower than the original humans, who at least needed the moon cycle to propagate. High alkaline diets, enzymes, fresh juices, oxygen, and chlorophyll containing foods, along with deep breathing and exercise, shortens the menses. Most female athletes, circus performers, long-distance runners, tennis players, tend to slow their menses to no more than 1.5 days. Most vegetative, animal-eating, white sugar-containing females have their menses extended to a 5 to 7 day men's cycle. Many normal, healthy females don't even start menstruating at 19 or 20 years old, and then usually worried parents, ignorant doctors, or money-hungry doctors bring their menstrual cycles on with intensive efforts. And I won't be so low as to tell you some of the practices to induce menses, but maybe some of you males or females may have heard of them. And they can become extremely violent and volatile. All original zygotes are females when formed. They later change, and as our planet has lowered in its vibration, now that is at least 98% still true. After 6 to 8 weeks, the male fetus starts to secrete testosterone, otherwise it would have remained a female. Now please, we're going to start getting rough. Listen intently and take it accordingly. There is no truth until you decide what truth is. Sometimes a small quantity of testosterone is secreted, just enough to make testes form on the developing embryo, but not enough to utilize proper brain chemistry and pituitary balance, and indigenous homosexuality can be produced. I don't need to repeat that because you heard it, didn't you? How many want to hear just one more time? I thought that. Boy, I'm getting psychic. Sometimes a small quantity of testosterone is secreted, just enough to make testes form on the developing embryo, but not enough to utilize proper brain chemistry and pituitary gland balance, and indigenous homosexuality can be produced. Birthmarks are the mental impregnations and decreased ability of woman to still mark and control the vibratory rates of her cells. Dermoid cysts are the undeveloped cells starting the first trimester of fetal development, and microscopic examination will verify this fact. The hair, teeth, and nails are there. In many cases, this budding tendency can go on each side of the dermoid casing and may become even other type of cysts, especially when improper chemical balance is maintained due to drugs. The word conception means to conceive mentally. Man descended from woman, and circumcision is the artificial means to finalize this separation. The male testes is a woman's descended ovum, now encased within the scrotum. You know what's coming next. The male penis is an elongated clitoris. The female fallopian tube, made by Fallopian in 1523, is the male vas deferens glands, or urethra duct, which is really an amalgamation of the fallopian tubes. The male prostate, and this is one of the reasons why prostate trouble is on the increase, is an atrophied womb, and every man has the mammary glands of the female and can produce milk if he is normal. The bulbourethra glands of the male are the equal of the larger so-called vestibular glands of woman, and interesting enough, the female thyroid gland with the 3-lobe allows enough iodine storage to keep that bulbourethra gland functioning when man begins to dehydrate. What you've heard is different. What you heard may already be agreed on by some, heard of by many, and now is being considered by you in the audience. I state this is just the start of what has been the fall of man on earth and the propagation of a new kind of species. All in all, and since we have a man lecture to follow and a children lecture to follow it, I give you the reasons again for the difference possibility in sex, but the idea that it is possible to reproduce on earth without the union of sperm and egg. Now, again, before I turn this portion only, and please don't ask me about man and children, we have 2 new lectures coming up about them. I want to give you some research papers and items for those of you who want to either correlate that or to do it on your own. One is called The Redundant Male. It's a book by Dr. Jeremy Scherfas, C-H-E-R-F-A-S, and Dr. John Gribbin, G-R-I-B-B-I-N. 2 books by Professor Hilton Hotima, H-O-T-E-M-A. One, The Physiological Enigma of Woman. The other, The Great Red Dragon. Both by Professor Hilton Hotima, H-O-T-E-M-A. The Sky People by Professor, no, non-Professor, Brinsley Leukoria Trench, Brinsley, Lepoer, and then trench like a digging trench or a trench coat. The Star People, Brad and Francis Steiger. The Star People, Brad and Francis Steiger. And Man the Unknown by Alexis Carroll. Man the Unknown by Alexis Carroll. It's open for questions, statements, and comments on woman only. What a wonderful subject. Okay. Oh, let me ask this again. Can they come to the mic again? So this can be recorded. If you would pose a question, could you please approach the mic so it go on tape and won't be inaudible. If you don't wish that, then you may hold it for later on. Pardon me? Repeat the question. That will stop it from coming up. Sometimes I won't be able to hear the question. That'll be the problem there. If you want to double it on again, then fine. Okay, I'd rather approach the mic if you don't mind. And if you have questions, therefore, on just the woman lecture, you might want to kind of just form a little line there. And if you don't, then we can move on to the man lecture. We do. Careful again. You can walk over there. It's all right. Walk in front of his camera. He doesn't mind. Okay. Right. Yes. I'll have to let the ladies sit down and then we'll talk. I totally agree with that. And since only women were being produced on earth and there was no race of man, for man to make his impact upon earth, things had to be changed. And when the first birth that came about through union of a fallen type of an animal and this female, man made his entrance on earth. Way out, if that's the way I understand it. Questions or comments, if there are any? Okay, I think he heard it. He wants to make sure that somebody like me say something like that. Yes, I did. My understanding agrees with what the young lady stated, that the first propagations, the reproduction, were all females. Only thing being born on earth were females, through the female womb. And then a mating was done with an animal, and man was produced. Okay?
Doctor,
yes.
You mentioned in your lecture on women, you see a higher life form.
Fair question. I really hate to propagate the answer because then we'd be taking off in spaceships for a journey that would keep us here 1 o'clock in the morning. Let me say, and let's see where this Liao is going to lead, that they were called in many cases, and I think the less term used was Anunnaki, and that they were people from off the planet who used engraftation, gene splicing, and genetic manipulation, and have continued to do so for some time. I haven't avoided a thing.
What animal did they make with while you were here?
A bipedal animal resembling now what we would call our basic primate ape.
How long ago was this?
Oh, that's a good question. I have no idea. Well, that's not true. I have ideas. Verification becomes different. Some say at least the last done was about 150,000 years ago. Some say this started at least close to 3.5 million years ago with this particular species of people. And that there was intelligent life even before then.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One more question. You stated man descended from woman. some people might have a problem with that. I would want to say that since you made that statement, can you explain to me, which I always heard, but nobody had gave me an answer to it, explain the Adam and Eve here. Was created by God, and he was the first human or living being on the planet, other than maybe animals, but God created the human form from his likeness, and he took from his God took from Adam and gave Eve. Can you explain that if you were, how you stated that man is a woman? That's in contrary to the biblical statement of how life began.
Okay. Let me state that many things that you will hear me say are in contrary to biblical theology. Let me state that what I am stating is nothing that I dreamed up and does not have to be true. There is no truth until you decide what truth is. My truth through research has been to take on the theory again of parthenogenesis, and that the Bible has been changed so many times and so many books removed from it and so many councils to duplicate and duplicate that men wanted in order to control other people and other peoples, till I can only state that could get into a conjecture that would bring every minister in Philadelphia in here, and it could go on for years, gaining nothing. The end result will be the research knowledge and hopefully wisdom that you believe what you want. There's no truth until you decide what truth is. I let that rest. I go no further. Yes, questions or comments? Good evening. Could you get a little bit closer to the mic? That's kind of tall for you. Just kind of pull that mic down. Be careful. There you go. Thank you very much.
That statement that you just made, that the Bible has been changed so many times. Could you help us with the original so that we might be able to scroll, or we might be able to look to get the original script to see just how and where the Bible is?
It's a fair question. I don't thank you, and I don't know that I have an answer for that. There are many Bibles. If you go into some research sections of some major universities, they will, because they've coveted them highly, have research articles that you cannot take out and publications that you cannot take out, which will show you many of the other Bibles. Without too much trouble, you could probably contact a group called Health Research, and they have a lot of the missing books or excerpts from it, which they copyright to say these are authentic and extant. And that these books, when there, would be able to support the theory that there have been many councils and many changes within it. It's not that hard even to find that in not only theosophical, but in theological seminaries. The point is, it's always been an issue as to how much to release, and therefore it's a thing that is discussed on what they call white papers, or communications within an organ or a church or a school, and doesn't usually get released to the public. It's not that hard to find, and I do give a lecture called The True Story of Christianity. That would be one I would not get into tonight. We've got enough enough interesting subjects to cover as it is. If you want to invite me back and pay me that kind of money, yes, we could get into it. Other than that, I can possibly mail you, if you call us at the Meta Center, some of the books to research. You have to get them as best you can. But there are many publications. Yes?
After there, last night you did a wonderful job of sharing my brains, but tonight you actually have to edit yourself. I can't imagine what's going to happen. The best is yet to come.
You're back here, so I'm glad you got those brains together, and you're being very integral, so let's hear you.
My question is, Prophet John was stating up here, if I also put another thing.
Wait a minute, I didn't hear that part there.
The gentleman before me spoke. Prompted a question after the other one after all my own head, which I'll ask in a second. But his question relative to mating with the animal, was there some reason why the female species made a decision or certain of those females of speech made a decision not to continue reproducing the normal way that they had to be reproducing. That's how they chose to mate with the animals of the spot.
They were mind controlled, and as they had been subject to even greater intelligences in the first place, once Earth fell from its magnetic field into what is called an electromagnetic field, they had no difference. God made them do it.
Well, who was controlling the mind?
I'm saying again, in many cases, when the reference is to God or Lord God, it does not mean original prime creator. And that there have been many such intelligence that have interfaced and subjugated, mind-controlled, genetically mutated, manipulated species on Earth for a very long time.
These were like experiments they were doing.
I didn't understand.
These were like experiments they were doing?
Experiments, yes.
The first question I was thinking of before he asked is, this special G-spot that they're referring to, it doesn't gland, the G-spot gland, it doesn't really exist, if so, is there any function?
Okay, now, don't leave yet. Hold on. Wait a minute. No, careful. No, I didn't. No. Please come back to the mic and say, it's distorted here. Did you say, what did you say? Would you repeat it again?
The G-spot.
That's what I thought you said.
Doesn't really exist as far as you can research, and if it does exist, what function does it have?
Okay, that's not my area of research. However, I have heard of other research props on radio, and I've read partially into a book about the G-spot in females that is very sensitive. It is usually back of the clitoris, and one of the connections is because of that, which is highly sensitive and sexual and stimulating. Having researched it, no. Having been spent more time than that, no. Okay. Yeah. All right. Talk. You might want to raise the mic just a little bit. There you go. Thank you. Talk to the mic. I'm sorry. I know. I tell you, let's turn the whole thing around so you can face me and make eye contact too. I can't hear you too well unless you talk directly into the mic. So. Okay, I was somewhat distracted. The young people in the back would make a lot of noise. Okay. 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 Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yes, sir. I would totally agree. And in fact, any somewhat educated, not even necessarily schooled research will show that there are all kind of genetic reproductions on Earth. They state that they have not cloned. They cloned at the University of Chicago all the way back in the 50s, 58 to be exact, 57, and put 5 such on an island and observed them for 20 years. They have cloned and replicated just about everything you can think of, including a dinosaur. And dinosaurs do exist. We can get into that too. That's a lecture called Gene Illogicals. There are just numbers of publications and that can show that they have crossbred everything. They now have plants that have insect venom, and they have insects with plant chlorophyll. I mean, when you do not hold to a spiritual role or feel that you are a co-creator, or even God themselves, because you feel that the Creator does not exist, then you do whatever comes in your mind to do. And on this planet, there's a lot of mind. Yes. Good evening, sir. I know you want to bring that mic up. Otherwise, you're going to get a crook in your back. You see that little round thing halfway down there, little knob? Metal. Okay, fine.
What is the definition of a heartbeat?
Of a heartbeat?
A higher being.
Higher being? My definition of a higher being. Okay, trying to cut through the quick and not. I would say like an angel for some would be to me somebody who has intelligence that for some reason or another is not understood by one who sees it. And consequently, I would say like a God or Lord God would be somebody with a very high IQ, past the norm, and so on like that. I definitely believe in a creator. I definitely believe in a first cause. I think we have changed the name to fit some things that we have not quite understood and has been taught that same kind of, whether it's fallacious or not, that same kind of concept. Did you understand what I said? I thought because you were walking back there. A higher being to me is, there's only to me in my mind one creator. That is the only higher being that I hold allegiance to. I can envy, I can respect, I can try to emulate, I can study other beings who are more intelligent than myself and then try to see if I can find wisdom in some of their actions. I do not feel that some of the references that we make are to necessarily higher beings, but just people who have had a chance to become a little bit more intelligent than we are. I still believe in a universal cosmic prime creator, but not in some of the multiplicities of gods and Lord gods that proliferate our religions. Okay, I'm glad that those, Okay, now I got to do a man and a woman lecture, and I'd like to finish it before 10 o'clock. Hello, my brother again. Yes, okay.
I apologize for being late. That's some things I had to take care of. But what I wanted to ask you, and the belief that I'm following is our Islam and the teachings that I'm receiving is that He is the creator of the first and last, and there's none other than Him. And what I wanted to ask you was, during the time of these other beings that were doing the gene splicing and manipulating, was this during the time of before the creation of Adam or after?
If we go on the biblical statement from the biblical statement itself, or the Masoretic text, the people who wrote the scribes of the Bible, they state that Adam was about 4040 BC. I would state that 4040 BC with the Garden of Eden, that there had been intelligent life on earth for at least let's say 3.5 billion years. And intelligent life proved for at least 200,000 years. So it's just a matter. If we take that has been interpreted by the ministers who study the Bible to be Adam and Eve in a garden 4040 BC, then I think that answer pretty much is my statement of that.
But as referring to the Quran, also is, in your opinion, has that been tampered with too?
Is that a what?
The Quran, in your opinion, has that been tampered with too?
Let's just say that whether I begin to get into all religious works that have been tampered with, anytime you put a publisher and an editor into a book and then mass produces, and you have nobody controlling them, anything is possible with any book, and they're presently changing the Bible again to update it to New Age consciousness.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
The glands, if I missed anything, like I said, you were talking about the glands for the man.
You missed a lot.
Okay.
But we're still going to talk about man and children yet.
What I have, okay, so you just touched on woman?
No, I didn't touch a woman. I didn't even touch on a woman, but we sure talked about woman a lot. including womb man.
Okay, thank you for the correction.
You're welcome.
I have a problem with sleep apnea. Is there any gland or anything in my body that I can do other than surgery at a hospital to help to alleviate this problem that I have?
I don't know. That would require a consultation. I don't even know in a consultation if I have enough intelligence to answer it, but we can talk about it, but not here. Okay? Thank you.
Please, Dr. Blair, could you speak about the birthmark again? When you touched on it, why do some children have and some don't?
Okay, peace to you too, sister. We will cover that again in our children lecture, but since it is asked now, and some of you may be leaving before that, a birthmark in one understanding is that the female has the ability, or had the ability, it's now somewhat latent, to control cells under her mind or under mind control, and that certain markings at certain areas of the body show what brain was active, left or right brain, and also the area would show the area of influence. For instance, in many cases you will have boys with birthmarks on their right side above the waist, and then you'll have maybe on a few below the waist but on the left side. Whereas you'll find more girl markings in the center of the back or on the left side, and then in some cases below on the right side. In many cases, it's what the woman was frightened by, thought of, or in any way brought into picture. This is why women would see mice, and in many cases, especially before there was more stressful things other than seeing a mouse, and so you'd see a birthmark showing resemblance of a face or a head or tail of a mouse. A woman would crave strawberries because of the acidic nectar that was lacking in her system at that time, and a strawberry patch would be there. Many times, whatever she would see or think about became almost an imprint on that cell. As woman has gotten away from the mind control of that, the birthmarks have become more and more scattered. What is very interesting, there are some self-same birthmarks on different races and different genders within that race that have never even seen each other, but the patches are the same. That leads to something else entirely, which I refuse to get into at this discussion tonight. Okay?
Good evening.
Good evening.
My question deals with the Bible and Holy Quran. And the Bible states, "Let us make men," and the Quran states, when Allah is speaking, He says, "We reveal this to so and so," and we. Could you give us your ideas on who's the us of the Bible and who's the we of the Quran?
Not at this time, because the subject is woman, and we've kind of deviated from that norm, and now we're getting into biblical discussion and Quranic discussion, Al-Quran discussion, which I didn't want to get into. Let me say this though, since I didn't stop anyone else from asking the questions, let this be the last one until I come back at another time with biblical or so-called discussions there. Since it would not be fair, I should have said that, not be fair to not answer your questions since I went into the others, let me kind of deal with it, and please stay there until I finish to see if you want to say more. I think that the plurality shows other beings of higher nature or possibly mentality that were talking about what they wanted to do. But the point is, who then wrote about these beings, and how do we know successfully that that interpretation was correct? I would say if it is ad hoc, anything is possible. If it is strict and direct, then obviously about more than one person discussing what they will or will not do, and so be it. Okay, please, if you will, not that I would not love to do so, but because it was advertised as man, woman, and children, and I want to present that to you, let us not get into biblical discussions. I made my statement. You understand my statement. You have your feelings, and I do not at all take away from any of those feelings, but it's just a matter of time. Given another time, we could get into a lot of discussions about 16 crucified saviors, about many of the other books and many other missing books, but not at this time, please. Okay? Okay, is that all of the general discussions about the woman lecture for now? Good. If we may, then I'd like to prepare to get into my second subject tonight, which has been promised, and I want to try and fulfill, whether you agree with me or not, and that's beautiful, is the man lecture. Of course, it would be very, at this time, boring, if not more, to have just nothing but women running around on the planet. I think some women might choose to exit if that was the case. I know a lot of men would. So I'd like to now get into a little discussion, if we will, on man. And it's interesting, as I said before, when I give the man lecture, I always expect women. When I give the woman lecture, sometimes I expect men. But when I give the man, woman, and children lecture, we're going to have a fun, interesting time. Aren't we? Yeah, okay. Say that with some exhilaration and some happiness in your voice. We're going to have a fun time, right? Yeah. Man. It's interesting, too, that at this time in our race for space, at this time in our 1995 calendar year, that we have the O.J. Simpson trial dangling like a red dragon and a big sword of Damocles over our heads as we're looking at that and missing so many other much more important events that are happening in our country at a fast, almost frightening pace. But this is the way we do it. First with sex, then with race, then with, of course, the whole idea of one sex subjugating another. There is a day called May Day, celebrated throughout Europe and celebrated a little bit in the United States. It was canceled in a celebration a lot because it was stated that it was only practiced by communist nations and country, and the whole idea of May Day became one that was political rather than its original meaning. Its original meaning was taken from what is called May 1st, or Happy Day, Happy May Day, sometimes referred to as the rites of spring, the fertile season. It was a commemoration of the beginning of summer, the turning of spring, and was celebrated by the good ship Mayflower, or the flower that grew, the Maypole, and the May Queen. I begin this talk of man to only let you understand that it is an old custom celebrated on every continent of the beginning of man, or the sequestering of man by womb man. We'll make this clear as I move on again. Away from the religious and the puritanical and even the political thought who have used this concept to abuse it, I want to get into what the dictionary has stated about the phylum species called man. It says that man is an adult male human being. We're starting off in agreement, right? Hopefully so. I don't see any hands yet now. All right. Okay. That boy is a male child before he becomes a man, and at one time that the word girl meant young boy. Now that's just about what we heard about, or at least what I studied about and shared with you, was the same thing about girl and boy. Why has this nomenclature changed? What is it that has made the word boy now mean girl, the word girl now mean boy, or was it, like possibly I alleged at the end of the female woman lecture? The word patriarch means the father or head male of a family or tribe, and in the Christian Bible, of course, it was Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, examples of patriarchal or patriarchacy. We presently live in, and for some time have lived under, a patriarchal society or male-ruled society here in the United States, male Caucasoid dominant. The Bible says that Adam was the first man, and that the Lord God did create him, and that he placed him in a seemingly tropical paradise because he might become lonely, and made for him other animals, and finally a helpmeet, which was womb man. Because of this emphasis placed on man by the Lord God, religions and nations and political societies have accepted this planet-venerated man, and the church specifically says again that he is divine and the rightful ruler of all things, and that they were made for him and under him to control. Now, some things have happened in our society which threaten the male where he lives. Instead of a male man, we now have a male person. And I know you say, but it's spelled M-A-I-L. Well, at one time that M-A-I-L really stood for M-A-L-E because there were very few letter carriers that were female. That's changed in the last 40 years. There, instead of a chairman of the board, there's now a chairperson. A congressman is a representative. Mankind is now human being. And a policeman is an officer of the law, and you understand all the things that have really come into being over the last 15 years. Believe it or not, this has changed over the last 15 years. This is not an old subjugated thing. We were very patriarchal here, not only on earth, but especially in this country for a long time. We have homosexuality rearing its sexual head, and we now have AIDS threatening homosexuality. We have all kinds of divisions of mind as to who and what is right and what is man. And I say because of all of this, once you begin to question your thought and your concept, you begin to change that presence that is around you. Now, whether it was like the chicken and egg, that the thought had to be changed in the air and consciousness that we exist in, or whether or not as we change the air and the consciousness around us, is up to you to choose. But man has begun to change. And the word man, as understood, is definitely changing. Everything that I stated in the woman lecture, to save some time, pretty much holds true in the man lecture, especially as it is associated with woman and the woman lecture again. One thing with the ravages of old age, with ulcers, diabetes, and heart attacks, and so on and so forth, it is becoming hard for either sex to exist well, and man on earth feels himself somewhat now threatened. I state, since it was brought out before, and I was going to skirt this, but I won't. I'll tell this now, especially since the question of biblical theology was mentioned. I will look at this and interpret another way. Some of you who are Hebrew Israelites already agree to it. Some of you who are Islamic agree to part of it, and I'll run through this briefly, and then we'll see if we need to go over it again. If we state that in the first chapter of Genesis, that in the 26th verse it says, God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over, and then etc., etc. And that in Genesis 26 verse, it then says also, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female. We have here then a God creating a male and female at the same time and calling them mutually man. Later, a Lord God, and the two terms are used individually, creating another man and calling him Adam. And this is where the trouble really starts. What the modern theologists and preferably the theosophists are calling the second creation, or Adam 2, or colloquial again, Adam 1, 2's offspring. We have to then look at one basic thing. The Hebrew word for Adam, which means red clay. That Adamic man was physically formed from earth-found ingredients, and at that time there was a lot of clay structure everywhere on earth. The Hebrew word Yahweh was interpreted as Lord God, and from the tetragrammation YVHV, or Yahweh, the Hebrew word Yehovah, past, present, and future, that's what the phrase means, was interpreted as God. That the Bible is based generally on Hebrew scholars and scribes' interpretation of Oriental philosophy for a chosen people which were for to come. These scribes were called Masors or Masorites, and they wrote what is called the Masoretic text. Therefore, we now have a universally created, self-contained, parthenogenic, higher consciousness God created man, partially absorbed and identified on a single planet, expressly Lord-made lesser entity whose ability to reproduce itself as a God was lost, was then polarized, making the divine principle separate in two distinct bodies called male and female. This new and lesser creature was called by the ancient ones human, under the god Hubris, or animal self, animal god, which was depicted by the Sphinx. Since they now have found sphinxes throughout the earth, and sphinx on the moon and sphinx on Mars, all with the hue quality, animal quality, and since some look negroid and only a few look Caucasoid, we have a challenge of interpretation and possibly a need for great research. I quote that in Genesis 1st and 2nd chapters, and it came to pass, which means after some time had passed, when man began to multiply on the face of earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took of them wives, of all of which they chose, and there was born to them mighty men, and there were giants in the earth. Now, if any kind of logic can be applied to that reference, that biblical reference, it means a primordial race of people born of God, the sons of God, had no daughters or distinctly separate females amongst them, took to themselves those completely polarized units called females that were on earth, and eventually lost the female quality within themselves, and they were no longer hermaphrodites. They produced at first all females, and later on some males who were incomplete were produced and had to fight hard to continue to propagate their kind through operative circumcision, as their prostrate tried to become a womb, and again they had a sheath over the penis much as the clitoris had, and they had to be cut back in order to let this extended species exist as a self-contained person. The male reproductive organs called phallus or penis, prostate and testes, scrotum and orchic, and there is your key as a male, orchic, are similar in many cases to what is found in the female. The female fallopian tubes, again, resemble the male vas deferens glands. The male prostate, not prostrate, prostrate is to prostrate oneself in front of, on the ground, or at a lower angle. Prostate means to stand in front of alone. There also was a key which they hid from you. Every man has the rudimentary mammary glands of a female and can produce milk. And the bulbourethra glands of the male are equal to what is called the larger vestibular glands in woman, the same thing that I stated just backwards as when we gave the woman lecture. The elongated clitoris, when stimulated and or genetically mutated, becomes the penis. And the testes found within the scrotum is nothing more than a descended ovum. I repeat again, the keys here. Prostate means to stand in front of. Prostrate means to lie flat with your face downward. The prostate gland stands in front of the male urethra and in front of the bladder and ahead of the orchic gland. The reason why a man has prostrate trouble can be seen when you understand that the atrophied womb is not complete, and the orchid gland through its radiations causes live sperm to be produced only within that sac and makes a man separate from a womb man. Understand this collective title, man, met a interactive species or hermaphrodites that later on in the fall of man was called Adam 2, separate species with separate sexual reproductive organs. One following the menses of the animals of earth, but if man was a god man, there are planets without moons and consequently could not have mensing animals. Animals follow the cycle of a orbiting satellite. Man follows wherever the planet leads and is free to go to the many classrooms in the heavens. You didn't understand what I said, did you? How many did? That's beautiful. How many partially did, but are still thinking about it? How many didn't understand a thing I said at all, plus you don't want to expand your consciousness? Thank you for not raising your hand. Most men who are sons of God have a hole in the roof of their mouth just beyond the palate and up from the epithymus glands that leads to the nasal eye duct. I'll repeat that simply, and women, don't even waste time. If you are a real womb man, you won't have that hole there. The man will have it. If you take your tongues, men, put them near the roof of your mouth, near the teeth, and move backwards, and it tickles, you'll see again ridges, little furrows, and then a mound. On the reverse or obverse side, going back toward the end of the throat, near the larynx, and again the palate, up at the top, there's a lot of little soft tissue, and then you see a big mound and a little hole there, or an entrance to that cave. That hole is either closed or open, an indentation or big, depending on what kind of man you are. Now, let's take a whole minute while we do some homework in our mouths. Men only, please. If you find it, or if you already know of it, simply raise your hand. Okay? How many can't find it there at all? Only one man. I have to talk to you. Peace. Okay. Just don't know where to look. There is, again, a little soft area. You have to almost, now don't start swallowing. I don't want anybody going into epileptic seizures here now. If you have a tendency, don't do it. If you take your tongue, put it near the back of the mouth and bring it forward, you'll see from like a little pithy area, a hard rigid adder, and right in the middle of that is like a little mound, and right at the base of that, the base of course is now transposed, it's upward. There's a little indentation. Then you slide forward, it's like you're going down a hill, you come forward to the teeth. Okay, how many men now can again feel that area? Let me just see your hands. All right, now that little opening on the reverse side of that little mound or hill is what a lot of transposition and literature has tried to hide from you. It separates the two kinds of man now on earth, and definitely separates human from man. It is your ability to go through that channel up directly to the pituitary pineal gland, and once a month, as in women who has menses, you have an issue of air or fluid that comes down there if you're in any way balanced. Most men, not being told about it, don't do anything about it, or don't even realize what it can do or why it's happening. After a while, without proper nurturing, it becomes like an airflow, and you may have noticed sometimes even once or twice a week, especially when you're more rested and not under the stress of a job or a job or a business, then you will see a little air coming down there. Just in passing, I like to kind of query my audience as you query me. How many men have ever felt that little air rushing down, or heard that bubbling and wondered where the heck it came from, and knew it was coming inside their mouth but didn't know where? Let me just see. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. That separates the fallen man from the original man, and human, the animal portion of which, from man who was non-solar. Solar plexus grounded man. Oh, boo. It's just 10 minutes? Okay, yeah. About 10 minutes? About 10 minutes? Now? Can I conclude in 1 minute? You can reverse this and take it back. 1 minute. All right, you can take it back up again. Okay, we want this on tape, so as a consequence, I'm going to have to conclude here now. Don't go away just yet. How many minutes will we have afterwards to fix the film? How many minutes will we have afterwards to fix the film? Huh? How many minutes will we have after I conclude this part before we can take up again while you fix the film? Two minutes? That's all that's necessary? Okay, why don't you just rewind it, stop it where you want it, and then we can go from there, okay? When we left off, and you might want to just hold the tape for a second or two as we try to recap what was done before that time, was the idea that man himself may be incomplete as to understanding who he is, and that the separation or term of man versus human may be different. And I state also that man, mankind, and human may also be different, but showing you again that the collective noun, in this case man, may be a dualistic, in other words, including man and woman, and that there is references in biblical and also in scientific research that there was more than one kind of man, if you would. I had also stated again about the various glands that man had and how they somewhat emulate that are found in women, but then we separated to find that there was an organ or gland, if you would, that man has, the interest of which is at the top of the mouth, which woman has no part of, and that some men do not have on earth, and therefore that is one way of defining and understanding that there are two kinds of species here that we call man. One I would call human, the other I would call man. That's where we stopped, and that's where I'd like to now continue, if we will. Okay, again. In looking at man himself, we now see that this man with the divine cave, the legendary area by which man may go into himself and find out his infinite being, and open up many, many, many mansions of understanding as to who he is once he gets past what is called the cross of Calvary, or the crucifixion of the two thieves. The two thieves become, in this case, the nubal, ida pingala, pneumogastric nerves at the base of the spine, leading up to the base of the neck at what is called the medulla stem. The thieves, therefore, robbers, become that energy that is channeled backward down to keep man more an animal than to let man ascend to his higher consciousness and powers to become that of the gods or God himself. When man was said to be a fallen angel, it simply meant that man had fallen from the understanding of total consciousness, which makes him a co-creator on the thought plane. Was given a planet, therefore, lower in thought, where this could not be practiced until he learned what divine reality could bring, and therefore on this planet needed a mate, which was himself in the higher heavens. Now that may become difficult to stretch minds to, but as I understand in Philadelphia, you're beginning to expand consciousness at a great rate, so I say for what it is, that is the conclusion that I would reach for man. To reach that conclusion for man, however, is to also understand that the prostate gland itself, which takes a rich vitamin A, vitamin E, vitamin B complex to sustain, works hand in hand with the pineal gland. The pineal gland is best exercised at night between the hours of 10 p.m. and 2:30 a.m. and especially on full moons. This gland deserves total darkness in order to regenerate itself and cast what they call the astral light. That light reflects down to the base of man's spine while he is in a sleep state, and if the food intake has been rich in the vitamin B complex and the plant kingdom chlorophyll, It will also photosynthetically inundate the orchid gland, which then radiates back upwards, and the man becomes one. He becomes a living, walking, psychic being. Eternal emissions, and some call them nocturnal emissions, are emissions usually when that seed of light granted by the orchid gland is not raised up the spine, not used in extrasensory perception or in things which make man's question his very basic animal behavior. To do so is to raise man's consciousness, control one's dreams, and control what is called the astral body. To not do so is to seat in the sperm, ready for reproduction, to bring in a kind of soul that may continue to do that when man won't. And this is where then man needed a mate. To live is to know temptations. The term live, spelled backwards, is evil. The word live, spelled backwards, is evil. The word evil transposed is live. To have lived is to be backward and become the devil. The word devil, spelled backwards, is lived. Therefore, if one lives in evil and in ignorance, one becomes the life of the devil. Man is his own worst devil and creates then energy cycles which draw to them from wherever in the heavens they dwell, negative beings which can be termed devils. Impotency is as much a mental state in man's mind as is physical impotency. What man sees and understands and terms pictures from, he then brings to him. What man refuses to accept or refuses to see, he sends away from him. Therefore, man is surrounded by his own vibrations, and the vibrations that he holds in mind are man. Prostate, as I said before, means to stand in front of the gate to the higher heavens. Prostrate, as I said before, means to supplicant to anything that can give you physical confidence and physical bliss. The reason why the sons of God, or the so-called angels, the energies from other planets, came unto man on earth was because earth was really a divine garden, a wonderful commixture of everything from the planet Sirius, or from the Sirius constellation, whichever way you look at it, Canis Major, and those that were rejected from the planet Orion, or in a higher consciousness, the phylum constellation of Orion in the Pleiades. Those two oppositions have battled for the energies that has become man and woman on earth to see who will take over the Garden of Eden, the planet Earth herself. And once again use one of the most beautiful planets in the cosmos as a zoo, or a deep, again, genetic phylum for mutation, experimentation, and withdrawal. Because man has fallen here on earth, the progress of souls to the higher heavens has stopped feeding from the solar system, and man is bottlenecked with many energies and entities which we now call devils and lower energies. To stop that bottleneck and to let earth change, as now earth has come into the energy areas of another sun, is the problem and the challenge. The species who wants man not to progress will do everything in their power to keep man an animal and to bring out even more the animal side. The species who wants man to become as they are, and even more, because he has sustained the trials of time. Time is different supposedly on our earth. Wants man now to break the bonds of animalness and rise and ascend. The time for all of this that has been speculated on by many good books and bad authors is not in the distant future, but is upon us now. The weather changes and weather patterns that we see indicate this. The ozone layer peels back so that direct light can now come from the central sun, which will kill off all that is of lower vibrations and will bring down upon them the diseases of animals from which they partook. The conclusion of which can be only changed by the mind of man when he understands the power in his mind, and if he refuses to act, then human will be destroyed upon earth. Thus ends the man lecture. It is open for questions and comments. Not to forget, there is still a children lecture to follow. It's open for questions, comments, or so. Again, please use the mic so it can be recorded if there are any questions or comments.
Good evening, Dr. Blair.
Good evening.
I did not get a clear understanding of the distinction that you made when you started for me prior to the prayer. You were articulating about the location of the opening at the roof of the mouth, and I didn't see if I didn't get a conclusion to that.
Okay. The location at the roof of the mouth is just pretty much there. It is, if I can give proximity, because different skulls are different, it is roughly, let's just say, 3 inches from the back of the teeth at the roof of the mouth, which has a kind of a mantle and little ridges on it. You can kind of feel it, and it tickles. It's very sensitive area because a lot of nerve endings in there. Then there is like a mound, a hill, and then in what they call an obverse, or a sliding down, if you could make up down, in other words sliding backwards toward the roof of the mouth, there is a slope and a little cave like, or a little opening, and then you get into the pithy center leading back to the trachea and the palate and on down the throat.
I understood that.
Okay.
You had made there was a distinction between those who had that and those who did not. I didn't get a conclusion to that.
Oh.
That's what I didn't hear.
Human is, in the intent of my understanding, animal man. It means a male in this instance that is part of the evolved animals and even genetically made animals of earth, with a higher kind of a sperm cell, shall we say, a higher kind of a consciousness that was able to dwell on other planets, not only in this system, but from suns with high generative energies, that was bound to earth and then made to mate and produce what is now called human. I defer that man is not bound to the planet Earth, but is a gender of species around on all planets with or without moons. That human is the animal ingraftation of man on Earth and has now been able to proliferate and has gotten even lower than some of the animals by which the seed they have taken. And that mankind, which I really didn't get into and would prefer to get that on another lecture, but to make the Trinity complete, is a replicated, genetically spliced creature made by human and some what they call creator gods or energies that have done a lot of devastation on this planet as it is, which leads into a whole different, obviously, lecture.
So the opening implies the opening at the roof of the mouth means you are man.
Definitely. Okay.
Dr. Blair, you mentioned about that there was I didn't quite understand it, but there was a war, a fight, or a struggle going on between the star system, Canis Major, Canis Minor, Orion, and Places. What's that? You say
it's okay. Orion in the Pleiades, Pleiades, yes. In the Pleiades.
Orion, Pleiades. And Sirius and Canis Minor, Canis Major. Okay,
Sirius, I tried to oversimplify, and I don't think I did a good job at all. Canis Major is said to be a binary star, Canis Major and Canis Minor, in the system that we refer to now of Sirius. There are many smaller suns in Sirius, but only 2 major ones in this binary. And that from there, Earth is part of the furthest planets out of the Sirius system. We are part of the sun in Sirius. And that the energies which are on Earth have had a battle for some time as to which would rule this experiment here. The Syrians, of course, have more or less stayed in the background simply because the energies on Earth were not correct, and they had also deferred to a battle that was fought and lost it. Whereas the Iranians have had great input on what was here and even introduced a strong feminine quality on Earth. But again, when you understand that, you must understand that the energy field of Earth is composed of electromagnetic vibrations. In actuality, it should be a magnetic vibration only, and then higher consciousness can evolve here and maintain itself here. But like with the electricity that is killing us and hoping to set us back now, that's why we use electricity on Earth, and free energy is despised, because free energy would lead to magnetic propagations, would cause those who have, well, let me not say it that way, but those who have certain glands and organs that can vibrate higher to ascend to what they should be, and would cause a complete loss of the planet Earth to those of lower vibrations. So therefore, we've been given electricity, even introduced in what is called Earth's electromagnetic field.
Right, so the magnetic was before the electromagnetic.
Definitely.
And so could that be when, was that the influence, I mean the Canis Major or Orion, could that have been the influence on the women? You said that they were
approached by the sons of God, and at one time it's even stated by the Native Americans, by the Ibu people, by the Zulu people, and by the Dogons, that there was no moon on Earth. Earth had no moon. But once that planetary structure was imposed by the Pleiadians, then they had control then of Earth itself.
Oh, well then the Dogon people have a connection with the Syrians?
Did the Dogon people?
Yes.
Yes, in fact, one of their phrases amongst the Dogons are, we're going to the dogs. Canis Major, Canis Minor.
When you would define prostrate, I didn't get all of that. You said anything that gives, was it pleasure? No, you didn't use that word.
Prostrate is to fall face down before something larger, or humble oneself before an entity.
Right.
Prostate is to stand in front of. It means almost to stand erect. In this case, the prostate gland stands in front of the bladder, and the mighty gland that is called the orchic gland, which very little now is taught. It is our inner sun.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Peace be unto you.
Peace be unto you, brother.
You spoke about the ascent of man on the planet here. And I want to know, with the ascent of man, is there a time limit? And also, what is the final destination of man in his ascent? And is there a parallel ascent of the woman, such as she saw? Is there a parallel ascent of the running together, or is it a plane, or how does it plane?
Only human needs a mate, for human is incomplete. And even the hue by which man was formed from animal, the animal kingdom has killed off its inferiors, and they even now can have souls. Group souls they were. Now individuality and egos they have. You can see this now within pets who have individual personalities now, who will sometimes not even interface with other creatures of their own phylum, other dogs, other cats per se. Now that man in a sense has fallen lower than the animal kingdom, then that kingdom must now be left with a lower earth if earth is to graduate. All those are different lectures. Obviously many of you are well read and understand some of the concepts about what time we're in. Also, that man himself was a duality or parthenogenic. He can now refer to what he can only release at night when he goes to sleep. The astral etheric body, in which sex is non-entity, he can create through mind. that is complete man and woman, and they both can ascend. We now reach stages of that, and even when that was being reached, the medical society is setting foot to inject into our bodies serums which don't allow that ascent either more. They wish to ground us, those that have kingdoms other than earth.
Yes, thank you. One other thing, but in terms of these beings who are ascending, well, if there's some, how do we know that? Do they stand out from the rest? Is there some sort of identifying mark, identifying characteristic that will separate them from the ones who are human?
Those that are ascending that are female, short in the menses, do not have intuitiveness but have psychic ability, reproduce whatever they want when they want it, and again do not suffer from leukoria. Those that are males discover the mount in Gemini, understand Golgotha, the land of the skull, where many have failed and were crucified, and finds themselves beginning to open up in the astral at night, remembering their dreams in color, having visions of prophecy, and have usually always had contacts. They know themselves.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Hotep.
My question is about Sirius B. Is it a star constellation or is it another star system or moon? That's basically my question.
Sirius B, if we go on the teachings of the Dogons and the Tuaregs and the Silurs, are people who are generally of African ancestry, Negroid in nature and continents in this incarnation, and have continued the story of the amphibians that came from Lyra, Sirius. They state that once they were taught that they were here for a purpose, and was also meanings of, shall we say, the higher energies or higher rulers in the Sirius constellation to stand against the interference again from the Pleiadians. Then they also knew that once this was done, they would have direct passage back. Sirius B is an artificial sun created by higher intelligences. Sirius A was of the creator. They showed their ability to create suns, and therefore was sons of the sun, and could go on to the many higher heavens in the cosmos. Pretty much that is my understanding. Hotep.
I just have one question. Is the Caucasoid male mankind, or is he human or man?
One form of Caucasoid male was mankind and human, because human created mankind. Those teachings were of the underworld, which the Egyptians and Nubians tried to teach, which even Teutonic people tried to teach, from those who separated themselves that came out of the caves of the Caucasoids and swept down upon man on earth. So there have been now 3 creations, none of which were supposed to be, all of which now have been given the curse of incarnation so that they could understand what it was like to interfere with creative wills. Consequently, we have now the ability to inhabit all 3 of those bodies, and many souls have had to do so. That's why now they hide back hypnosis and regression and try to tell you that again it is all subliminal. It is not. It is a record when the souls have had to enter into animal bodies, man bodies, and mankind. And so much so that they begin to create a thought form which does not even exist, that they could not progress, that they had to go through somebody, and therefore until that happened they were landlocked or earthbound.
Okay, so if you're created from that, you cannot ascend.
Pardon?
If you're created from that type, you can't ascend?
No. We now know what soul inhabited one body at this time. Those souls that could come into a body that was not going to bind them or would be free to go forth in the end times came into certain bodies at this time. The male body is significant because it has the mound at the top. There are many so-called males on earth that do not have that.
the Dogon tribe mentioned that intelligence came in the form of an amphibious creature. I'd like to know if you can elaborate on that.
Only to the point that many of the amphibians came from both the system nearest the sun A in Osiris, there we go again, that slipped, but in Sirius, and Osiris was one of the, obviously, scientists that came from there, along with the sun B that was created for the humanoids made by the Sirians when they went too far. Thus, their mortal enemy of bad or negativity, which does not have creation of thought, but are masters of technology, the Pleiadians were allowed to gain interest to Earth. They came with them, of course, an animal species, which we could get into and won't, just as there's another form that also accompanies the Syrians called Lyrians. But at least it shows that there, no matter what form or humanoid form people take, the soul still is what counts. Pretty much it just showed that good and bad do exist. There is a professor at Kentucky State University who has successfully, since 1985, regenerated limbs. I'll give you the general philosophy, which is that an amputated limb has rings just like a tree. Each concentric ring organizes and controls one of the bodies of man. The gland and the hormones follow that pattern that each of those rings has intact. We call in those rings the DNA and the RNA molecule. The catch is to know which one of these rings to stimulate at the time or close to the time of amputation. If that can be stimulated, the organ will try to reproduce itself, because on the etheric plane it still exists. But as the etheric or spirit plane dissolves and is then, what do they call it, when they put in these artificial, prosthetic devices per se, then we use the ability. The sensing is still there. That's why the person still feels they have the limb. The brain still wants to transmute material to it. But we have been severed from the correct hormonal secretions and the correct stimulus, which is magnetic, to do so. Electrical things will cause it to bud, but it will be deformed and different. Now they use neither. They use chemicals, cauterize it, which stops the regrowth of it, and add a prosthetic device. It has been proven many times that it can be done. The professor by the name is Smythe, and you could check his research. He's at Kentucky State University. He may or may not talk to you directly, but he'll probably reference you to his white papers, which he wrote upon it, which you can get at any library.
And the other question I was concerned about, our pastor spoke one time about
Please, not so slow, not so fast. Bend that little mic down to you again. You're thinking so very fast, I have to go into hyper gear to hear you. Okay.
I was talking about one who was called the lion-faced man of boy gender.
A what kind?
Lion-faced boy or man.
Live-face?
Lion. Roar.
Lion. Thank you.
This lion-faced boy, actually, I understand that he actually existed, and that he was in the service, and the pastor had seen him. And he also said the reason why the boy was, the mother said that this occurred, was that she was fighting wild lion and it depended on her. Now, I have run to find out and see pictures of, because this was seemingly, it's really part of this century.
area where you would go to find the lion-faced boy. I do know that those stories about looking upon someone and coming out looking that way were used in the 17th century a lot by white women bearing black male children. I also understand that many black women bearing white children also said, because they were ashamed of what had happened, that this was the case. Worse than any of that are the gene splicings, DNA combatants that have created all kinds of creatures which do live on Earth. Some are in laboratories presently, and as we speak, at major universities throughout this planet, and I speak in truth, they have all kinds of captivities which they have created in laboratories that would turn your stomach. Worse than that, many of these captivities have souls, therefore they have knowledge of what they could have been or who they were. There's a lecture that I give called Gene Illogicals, which goes into great depth about that treatise. You're welcome. Understand, we're supposed to have one more lecture to follow. We can't stay here all night, so please, thank you, my brother.
Yes, just one question. What is the detriment of our continuing to think in the world of opposites?
In a world of opposites?
Yes, good and evil.
What is the deficit? Detriment. I think the detriment is pretty much what we see, which has pretty much reached fruition. If we always look for the extremes, we never look for the third force, which is the God force, which is a balance between the extremes. As long as we live in opposites and extremes, we must experience that which we think is real, the opposite of which, and therefore we never find a balance of which, and therefore we never progress. Already we have had too much good and bad, too much right and wrong, and not the middle path, which says right and wrong are only things to take you away from the return, which we are supposed to do, back to the mental molecule that created us.
Something that I've been hearing about life under the earth. Can you shed any light on that? Is that in validity? Is that there's life under the earth? People live under the earth?
That is not of this lecture, but in the point that it is, I will reference it. There is said to be in Amenta and in Agartha and in Shambhala a life form that was put upon the earth that was green, and from time to time is replaced on earth, and that life form was able to amalgamate successfully with mankind, producing a whole different kind of energies. The treatises have stated that there are both the smallest of my works in the earth as well as the largest. They are found again fibia and tibular bones that are over 18 feet long, stating that at one time on earth there may have been at least a 60-foot giant. There are dwarfs in sarcophagi that have complete formation that are no more than 3 inches, found in little caskets even here in the state of Colorado. The ancient ones, and of course amongst many of the Yoruba, and I will not go too further than that, talk of the Tobaluske, who are the little ones that can be summoned to do the bidding, who dwell only with man on earth. There's so many mysteries of earth. To each of these should be approached intelligently and on a different subject discussion. I think far too many times we go through so many of these things without understanding of any, therefore we get nowhere. The inner earth should be understood once we begin to understand what has happened on the earth. Yes, that there is an inner earth is a definite. Yes, that they have interfered and we have interfered with them is a definite, but now all things are under change. And that is a story, a lecture within itself, called the hollow earth, the earth itself, which I have on tape, and the twin earth. Okay. Yes.
Dr. Blair, if I was interested in researching for further information and insight on this subject matter, where would you suggest that I start?
On the whole subject matter?
Generally speaking about the original orientation of man and woman's existence here on the earth, and how other planets, beings, so have had a direct connection with the existence of man on earth?
It would be somewhat difficult for me to answer that one, please, first. It would be somewhat difficult to select one book that would teach this. This is probably one of the problems, for they separated the books at OWN, the last library that was devastated. They renamed it, of course, what do they call this guy's name that came in there? Alexandrian Library. It was called the Library at OWN at Pergamo, one of the last ones, which had the books in text, even about the wars of the Lord and the books of Abijah and the book of Jihad and so on and so forth. To find it now, you'd have to belong to some secret society that thinks you're worthy, or be able to get into some of the research areas, or probably after this year, or maybe even this year, because it is a heck of a turning year, maybe at health research again. There are numerous books. One of which could be The Great Red Dragon, another of which could be the book of Shambhala. Most of the books of Professor Hilton Otima have references within it, but the books were not given freely to the public. And although that rule is changing, it is not just in one book. They're a compilation of books and journals and so on and so forth. Okay. Thank you.
Good evening, Dr. Blair.
Good evening.
I was wondering if you can go into the effects of drugs on man and his ascension or his ascending, whether any drugs, if they do have negative effects or positive effects, and how drugs are used in our society to keep man from ascending to his higher power.
That is an entirely different lecture. That lecture is called Drugs and the Astral. I just tried to give it away at $9.95. I hope that somebody would buy it. To simply bypass that, and because it is connected with man, I would say that man has a gland that leads directly to the pineal pituitary that can be gained through the access to the roof of the mouth. Essences is what causes that gland to arise, not solid food substance. And dreaming and thinking causes it to activate and begin to dream and think for him on the higher heavens. Therefore, it connects him directly with the higher heavens, which is governed by thought. Drugs kill thought, and drugs control that gland for man, and man becomes a zombie and slave rather than a higher being, and becomes less than the animals. That is why drugs are given, and that is what melanin is now fighting against, as it's being reactivated through the ozone break and the higher energies now coming back to Earth. Okay, are there any other questions or comments at this time on man? And let us not forget children. Okay, then I'd like to move, if I may, into the concept of man. But one thing I did leave out, and how I did that, I don't know, but things happen. So consequently, I want to correct that. In finishing the woman lecture, I gave you only one gland that was erroneously reported, and that is the 3-lobed thyroid rather than the 2-lobed thyroid. The 3-lobe belongs to woman. What is not talked about at all are 2 of the female glands that are still there, one in almost an atrophied state, the one that can be renewed. To preface that, I'd like to give a whole minute's talk about mitochondrial DNA. This is for those who want proof, and for those others, again, who are on the borderline, then you'd have to study mitochondrial DNA. There are 2 DNAs now talked about in genetic, circles. Mitochondrial DNA and nuclear DNA. Nuclear DNA is in general a mixture of both parents' genes. Mitochondrial DNA is again a inherited gene from only one, and that is the mother. It is altered again by what they call mediation, And when that happens again, it leads to racial differences. They now can genetically prove that there is one mitochondrial DNA that may be the mother of all human life on Earth. But for nuclear DNA, it takes radiation to bring it about. When radiation is entered upon the womb, then certain glands in the female will begin to undergo mitosis on their own. This is why for a long time women were told to avoid direct sunlight, and especially moonlight, which would cause mitosis on a lower energy level. The two glands are these. I'll repeat them one time, and I'll spell them once. They are the epiphyseal. It is between the uterus and the ovary and the mesosphinx. It is spelled E-P-O-O-P-H-O-R-O-N. The other is the Parthenogenesis. It produces seminal fluid and seminal secretions just like a male, so-called. It is spelled P-A-R-O-O-P-H-O-R-O-N and is below the mesosphinx. That concludes the woman lecture. In dealing with the final lecture tonight, that of children or child, I find it probably one of the most interesting because a child or a children is what is called an incomplete. It is one that is waiting for maturity to become either a male or female, man or woman. That state in between is when each soul undergoes a chance or opportunity to learn from those who have either previously misused it or whose previous existence it did not know and did not have the opportunity to learn from. Children or child, or what they used to call in many cases kinters, entering into kindergarten or the little zoo garden of Earth, in many cases come from distant areas and planets that need to learn what it is to find ego and physical reality. They journeyed so long in the heavenly thought planes that they found very few planets willing to accept them and not completely hurt them, by which they could experience what we call physical reality. The mother and father combining in thought as well as in physical coitus generate energies by which these thought forms, based on their level of radiation, are drawn into the cycle of birth. Therefore, the time of coitus and union is important if it is to propagate through the birth canal, through what is called the lower vibratory canal, the way of being born on a planet such as Earth. Drugs and anything like drugs that curtail the ability of the soul to know self at the time of conception pulls in lower energies without question. That is why the drugs are necessary, and many souls made their entrance on the drugged mind, which was proliferated by the state to stop individual souls from becoming great. Thus you had your Dr. Spocks and no whipping. You had using of drugs and doing anything you thought and having copious coitus during that time so that those lower entities could come into our planet uncontrolled. They have, and they have brought forth their kind. Those unchecked children are now the scientists of the day with very little spiritual insight because they had parents with very little wisdom. As a consequence now, these earthbound souls are holding back the progression of this planet. And they come in at a time when the earth needs to have no souls bound, but the freest thinking, most spiritual souls necessary to upgrade the planetary vibrations and stop the earth from being annihilated. It's just that simple. Because of this, of those who ducked out, shall we say, before from Sirius, they now must make a stand. because the ones from the Pleiades who have very little to gain because they have lost their ability for souls and have very few herbs by which they can breed upon and feed off of the fear and death that goes with such breeding, they're on their way out. They're coming back one more time to try and rectify that by trying to get you to accept souls and make children of their breeding so that they will have a place to stay. It's just that simple. The souls that you now call children are probably older than you and have wisdom beyond yours, but they did not have a chance to prove it. When you don't have to fight an enemy, you can brag a lot. When you have to fight the battle, you must come off of the theory and put it into practice. They look for the practice here on the earth, one of the best planets to bring in physical reality to a norm. Those children have a lot to teach you, but they must first be made to unlock their reservoirs of regenerative energy, which we call psychic patterns, through what is called, again, reliving past lives, or through the birth canal when they talk directly to the carrier or mother, or through physical sight, which unlocks the little programs hidden in the subconscious of both, which we call the right brain. Not only will that make everybody more honest and more psychic, but will stop the entrance anymore of lower vibratory individuals, because those souls will respect coitus and understand that going along with it is a need for complete mind control of their own. If they are not allowed, since they are very harsh creatures, inasmuch as they did not understand lies and did not understand dualities, they will fight to the death to stop that from proliferating through them, and therefore they seek guidance. If the guidance comes from you, the parent, they will accept it. If it comes from the state, they will not accept it, and the state will have to have a showdown, but the state knows that they came here as warriors because they did not know what untruth was. Having in many cases also a secondary means of energies, or people who were lied to before, who were made to be earth-bound because they were not told the truth, they also could not graduate to the higher heavens and further classroom teachings. They resented what happened to them and came back very angry and wanted to return quickly. The tape, Drugs, and the Astral will explain to you about the 4 levels of the astral plane and of the higher mental planes, and even to the aid of what is called the odic plane. I can only say, without staying here for 3 or 4 more hours or 3 or 4 more days, which you wouldn't want me to do anyway, that the souls are old. There are no new souls being created at this time to enter into the planet Earth's density. They are here for relearning or to exercise the truth that they think is real, and they look for you either for guidance or they actually will destroy you. They are strong. One thing they have in common: some are extremely bad, some are extremely good at birth, but one thing is for sure: they are all strong. They do not accept weakness, they do not understand weakness, and in many cases they are very angry that they're here in the first place. Without direction, you're building an army for the evil negativities referred to as the devil. With direction, you're building the umbilical cord for the angels to transit not only to Lyra and to Sirius, but even beyond this cosmos and into the pure thought realms. They make you better for having had them, but they challenge you because they make you be right. They make you think, and they take time. If you don't have time, don't bring them in. In conclusion, I simply state this: what you've heard tonight is different. What you've heard tonight in many cases rings bells that you know are true, and for others rings bells that say break. To kind of summate what I say, I would like to have you bear with me, if you will, for about maybe 10 minutes, as I would like to read 3 poems. I'll try to make them brief, but I think they kind of summate in poetry what I've tried to say to you in prose. One is called simply Mother Earth. Now, in this age of unisex, neuter gender, and the like, it really no longer matters where the bar rests on the bike, and hetero and homo are not adjectives but nouns, And as we really start to look at it, it can be quite profound, for if Earth is a mother, she undoubtedly has a child, and attempt to hurt her offsprings may most definitely drive her wild. Now we say we are God's children and He watches over us. Well, if He's still tight with mother, it may even cause Him to fuss. But then we must consider whether He is really she, and in calling Earth our mother, we may be offending a He. My, what with atom bombs, tornadoes, famines, floods, and earthquakes too, I really can't afford to offend a parent. Now can you? Now our sun reversed polarity in 1959, and if it changed from our father, we may never get to shine. Yet if we really ponder this situation, it can be completely mad. For if our earth changes her sex, we may lose what we never had. Now I hope this is not as confusing to you as it's beginning to get to me, for since the sons of God, so the daughters of men, it's been heterosexually. I truly don't know the answer, for we each must find our truth, but I have been taught without mothers and dads that there can be no youth. Yet maybe that is the answer in crystal clarity, for if we offend no one's mother and castigate no one's dad, we may all reach polarity. Thank you. Number 2, which I simply call reason. A man once sat in the garden of life, and he viewed first the sun, then the moon. While enraptured by splendors, he longed for a wife. Needing balance, he prayed she come soon. A woman attracted by Earth's blue-green glow did magnetically enter its gate, then deciding to tarry a while ere she go, her longing heart craved for her mate. Looking skyward at heavens and firmament wide, they realized all parts must be one, recognizing a burning and growing inside, to be whole and yet sums of the sun. For each tiny comet, each vortex and sphere, each galaxy, cosmos, and nebulae only led them to know their Creator was near, and it stripped them of ego and the personal I. As in nature, whose rhythms and balances flow, making love to all creatures on high or below, as in humans whose self numbers only to 7, they must find their mates if they e'er find their heaven. And now on earth can truly begin to see the balance that love brings to all. We will make mistakes till we search deep within for ourselves the best mate of all. And then finally, in summation, human. O magnificent beast on this strange enchanted land, you roam your asphalt jungle clothed in skin that we call man, insensitive, incredulous, incongruous to all of God's created works that you find both large and small. Just how long can you travel in your self-appointed web of total make-believe about who and what was said, changing who, changing how, and what was in antiquity as the whole world comes to know how you've lied of history? By distortion, deletion, deception, and disguise, you've altered written records from the cosmos to our skies. You've reconstructed universes and summoned even hell, and there seems to be no end to the lies your mouth can tell. What you view on graphs and prisms, what you see in lens and scope, seems too staggering to your mind and ego brain, and so to cope, you distort the very heavens. You'll change the smallest beast. There's nothing you won't do to let your fame increase, and yet you know within, from the most unto the least, that your time is running out, and your lies they soon must cease. As we view each bright new morning, even through polluted skies, we know there is a Creator, for creation never lies. And so we come together, we New Agers tried and true, seeking blessings from our Creator and divine release from you. I thank you and good night. need for consultations tomorrow while I'm still in the city, or would want to contact us later, or have a one-liner that we can maybe deal with, then I will accept those again. Either way, I do thank you very much. I wish to thank also Moana Tour, the brother and his wife who invited me here to Philadelphia. Many of you talked about it, but you didn't do it. He did, and I hope that you will support him as he brings other speakers in. For me, it's been a ball, and to see this many people come out in 2 days of bitter cold is very much reassuring to my heart, and I thank you also for that. Sure. Sorry. Somebody wanted that? Okay, I've been asked by my inviter to do a demonstration, if possible, about the diodes. I did this last night. I wasn't going to do it tonight. Since he's asked, I guess I can't say no. It's just a demonstration showing you the power of the diodes. Since many of you question, since it's so small, can it work? It will be done right here up front. I'll probably just come down there. So if you want to stay around for that demonstration, fine. Let me again reiterate, I would like not to leave with the tapes. I don't take it as a direct insult. I just simply say that to me, what's on these tapes for the price I'm now offering is worth buying. Again, the drugs in the astral, which goes for $14.95, I'm selling for $10. Okay, I'll put it aside for you. Okay. The AIDS 1 and 2, which sell for $14.95 a piece, I'm selling for $10 a piece. And the mind control in America, or altered states, that one, I'm selling again for $14. All right? Okay. I'm sorry. Pardon? I think there's one at the table. Yeah. You wanted which now relation? Drugs in the astral? Okay, I'm sorry, we still have people waiting to ask questions, and I do appreciate that. Thank you. Yes. Hey, Sisters Meva, how you doing, Marfa? Good.
Hi, Dr. Blair.
Okay.
How are you?
Doing good.
Excellent lecture.
Thank you.
Good information.
Thank you.
One of the questions I wanted to ask is, you talked about these new souls coming in, incarnating on planet Earth. What year did the children, the new souls started coming in? Can you give me an approximate year?
Well, you are a new soul, okay, whatever year. Many new souls. There's like an avant-garde or shock troop that came in, but as we get closer and closer to D-Day, and D-Day is now, We're in past 90. We're in the 90s now. We're in possibly the last 22 years of Earth being in existence in any form that we think. In fact, Earth is changing each day. That's why you're seeing the weather patterns change. And between the interventions, what they call weather modifications and so on like this, they're just accelerating and bringing on almost what is to be the inevitable. The only hope of really changing this, they call it polarity shift or photon belt, I don't even call it that, which changes the kind of cosmic energy that we now draw from the Creator, is people that have a direct link to the Creator. And those people are being made drugged addicts, and they're losing their ability to do anything. So I really say that it's almost cut in stone. So these souls have been coming in. They're coming in like mad since the shall we say the 1975s and so on like this, when they had this great big throwback to the drug culture, you see. So the ones coming in now since 85 are strictly here for one reason. They want to overthrow or become. They don't want any more foolishness. They're looking for directions, and they have their own unique set of values. So that would be the ones. Anyone coming in now really is almost behind the scenes. It's probably one that is here almost just to get in, just to say. In other words, some are even being born even though they know they will die soon. Much has happened in Biafra, that happened in Nigeria, we felt, and it happened in Ethiopia. We felt very sorry for them. We should not feel pity for that is ours, because we are no more than they anyway. But some of them didn't need but just to make an exit on the physical plane in order to kind of fulfill a contract, and they're gone. They realize when they're born, why they're born, they make that choice as they come in, and then they either fulfill it or they go away frustrated. There'll be no frustration at this incarnation. Now there'll be either a big separation and a graduation, but there'll be no more, shall we say, ambivalency.
Okay, my next question, I'd like you to talk about how we can help these children in bringing forth their best efforts so that they can have a high quality of life and do things that need to assist the planet in changing their consciousness, the community's consciousness, as well as the world's consciousness. I heard on one of your other tapes where you were talking some things about there are some things that you can do while the children are sleeping and so forth, that you can enhance their consciousness to keep them away from the other side of things where they go the wrong way and do the wrong things. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Those are personal consultations, and they come under a course that I teach. That information I don't give for free. I've given a lot tonight because of, as I say, in respect to people who have come a long way to see me, and the fact that you even drove me here in the cold. But those are instructions, like techniques of meditation. They're best done under a class setting, an intensive, or on a personal consultation.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
You said something about making a tape where you could,
I understand, and if you bought the tape, some things I put on a tape so others will buy more tapes, or go and contact me or contact our group. You understand that. I'm not collectively sharing that because that is not part of tonight's subject. I already have combined three distinct subjects, and I've even elaborated on that. The how-to techniques for some of this, no.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Blair.
Welcome.
I really enjoyed this evening, and I do have a lot of your tapes already. And I consider you one of my teachers.
Thank you.
Yes. In the souls that are coming now, and you were saying that they will, one of the other things you said, they are here to fight or flight. And that's sort of what you said tonight. You didn't exactly use those words, but I understood that that's what you meant. And the children that are being born to teenage children, parents who really are children themselves, does that have any bearing on the same reason that they're here? What is happening there? I mean, why? Because you were saying that if you understood at conception that this is what you're bringing into the world, then you would bring it in except to give it guidance, what have you. But with these teenagers, they're so young themselves, they don't understand a lot of things. What's happening there? Did you see a lot of that happen? Is this part of the blight?
It is definitely a blight without question. It's a blight upon mankind and a blight upon the planet. The state, quote unquote, whoever that is, the government, whoever that is, or whatever that is, has seen fit to try and retard the new energies peaking at this time. New energies meaning those being born which have the power to invent or to prevent, whichever way they go. They know that these souls are being born, and amongst them is also being born an avatar, one who will have direct communication with both the Lyrian, Sirius, and the Orion Pleiadian systems. Because of this, they want to control all new births. They want to take those souls that are coming in and use them, and it is even their intention to take the ones who have already been misused, either through their own drug intervention from the shots that they gave them, or through being born to weak parents who have already followed the lesser way, by turning them loose not only into gangs, which they foment and want, but turning those gangs loose into the societies themselves as shock troops, sanctioned by the government before the real takeover and martial law is declared. So I think it's quite obvious what is happening. Even amongst them, and even amongst the rap records which they use to try and control their minds and to tell them what to do, which was all negative, even now there are lyrics being brought out and harmonies being brought out which can help to reverse even the drug addict, because the planet is changing. The fight is on. The whole thing is, like I said on the tape, there is a war on those who have melanin and those who don't. There's a war on those who have souls and those who have lost them or never had them. I simply refer to it as the melanin wars.
Right, thank you. And you mentioned about reincarnation, and I may have misunderstood, but I just got from what I understood from what you said, that reincarnation, it seems like it's not something that's going to continue after certain changes. It's something that is happening because something happened, so reincarnated souls have to, or is this something from time?
There's a whole tape that I have again on reincarnation. See, these are whole different subjects. They get very vast. I'm trying to kind of give one-liners or five-liners to try and give that. But my understanding, and this is the end of this as far as I can see it, is that not all planets have reincarnation. We have reincarnation here because we have over 5 races here. Because we have races we don't even realize. And we have souls able now to impart into those bodies life and to learn from existences within those bodies. Consequently, we have something that maybe 1 or 2 other planets in the galaxy may have. A need to have 5 different kind of lives and 5 kind of different bodies, all to do one thing, learn what the planet has to teach and get off of it, to go back to the Creator. So this is why, again, but on the tape it's explained much more easily, and the whole thing about reincarnation as I, in my limited way, understand it.
Okay. You said...
Let's make this the third and last one, please. Okay. No, let's make this one. Okay.
One more? Okay. You said also, this information about a replica, someone to replicate between the 2 star systems that was born, these souls being born today.
Okay.
I mean, someone is going to be born that's going to have some power to influence that, or maybe... I'm trying to understand what you mean by that.
Well, it's interesting that you used the term replicate. What I meant to use was avatar, a being divine to lead both in the heavens and on the earth, and all that's in between it. Replicate, however, is a very interesting, what can I say, adjective there, or possibly a personal pronoun. I'm not really sure, depending on how it's used. In this case, they will, or he will, or she will, or it will, because it will be very cosmic, be able to replicate between that is on earth, that is from Sirius, and that is on earth from the Pleiades, and that is on earth and even in the earth. It will be like a divine person or being, a president or a leader or a priest, whatever you look at it, that will have both the psychic and physical self under control. And from that will cause an offspring to come forth that will live very shortly, but will have very divine powers, so one can see what the end result of physical manifestation can be. This is what is supposed to be born either now or has been born by 1989, and which also some of the governments of the world are hard-pressed trying to destroy and kill or find out who it is.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good evening.
Birthmarks that you were talking about. Specifically, if the child has a smaller mark when he is born, he or she is born, and it enlarges as they grow, as they get older, what's the significance to that?
What is the which to that? I missed that last sentence.
Okay. When a child's born,
No. Just the last sentence. What is? You asked me a question.
Significance to the birthmark enlarging as they grow older.
Okay. Many cells grow larger as we grow older, and many cells just disintegrate because they're not used or not used correctly. The birthmark enlarging, as I would understand, is just simply a RNA pattern that would follow whatever regenerative would normally there. The DNA is the one that would bring in the energy, the gene. The RNA would play out that energy and gene harmony. So it would just normally grow. Now, if you're talking about just that group of cells growing so large that they dominate the entire trunk or area of the body, then of course I'm not sure. There could be a lot of reasons for that, and probably one of which would be some type of serum that's been given or some kind of gene altering that's been given artificially. But if you mean just that it grows and that the person is large, it's in proportion still, then I say it's just a matter of matrix, just a matter of cell evolvement.
You also stated that the souls that are here now, there is no more that's being created at this time.
I'm sorry, but there's no more than what?
You said there was no more souls that are being created. Souls that
Created,
are
okay.
Okay, but with new babies coming, these are no longer new souls, am I right?
New babies coming are no longer?
These are not new souls coming in, is that right?
Okay, yes and maybe no, I don't know. When I say no more being born, I simply mean that there aren't any new souls. Would mean that they were just coming into consciousness, and this whole system no longer even accepts that kind of a soul now. They would be born in Havana, a place where they call pure heaven, pure near the Creator, before they would need to undergo these kind of trials. This is an area of a heaven now that has reached its max. In fact, it's been stated that we will undergo either a direct separation here on this planet, creating a new earth, and the old earth being a binary, still existence, but separated by vibrational rates, or we will have to amalgamate almost into a supernova to become sun systems and learn from there. That's a whole different set of principles too, of what suns are and how that is. Definitely no new souls, just created with blanks and converted, shall we say, again, neurosystems would be allowed to come in now. There would be no reason for them, and they would learn nothing.
Any baby that is being born, as far as today is concerned, should women, is there any drugs that they may be using on our newborn babies coming in now to prevent mind control to these babies coming in? Is there something we should be avoiding? You know, first when if the babies are born, they want to shoot them with this and shoot them with that. Is there something we should know about avoiding certain drugs being injected into our babies coming in now?
Well, that's beautiful in as much as you say mind control, but you're using mind control as a control of the mind of the baby by the mother, which is the way it should be, to the point that the baby has already communicated with the mother for 3 trimesters. What I'm using it is, and what the state is using, is mind control by completely brainwashing, subliminating, and then converting, reconversion tactics, a soul to be whatever they want it to be. Beta, alpha, delta, whatever control they want it. Making it beta like a soldier, alpha like a learning individual for everything bad or good, and completely controlling the creative right brain. It's much different for what they want and the results of what they want it for than it is why the purpose of birth was given to woman and the mother now.
very much.
Very welcome. Let's kind of please limit it to no more than 2.
Good evening, Dr. Blair.
Good evening again.
My first question is, if you had children and they had incurred a traumatic experience, such as being caught in the fire or being exposed to some type of molestation, is there anything that a parent can do or a concerned adult to maybe, first of all, if they incurred these such experiences, would that in turn stifle their inner growth or their spiritualness? And is there anything that a parent can do to maybe help unlock these things?
Collectively, yes. Individually, you need a consultation, or that parent does, because I can only speak from a generalized scope and not for an individualistic situation. The parent usually is warned either in dream or in physical reality 3 times before such a soul takes that tangent. In many cases, the soul is warned 3 times, and then sometimes 3 times again. Those things come in 3s. If they do not hear it, then they pass by the easiest resolution. After that, it begins a matter of prayer and thought, and again beginning to understand not only who the child is, but the parent is. I have raised children, and in the process of rearing another one. They have had some pretty rough situations, not 2 of the ones you named. And I think that through meditation and talking to them directly, and as a sister talked below, certain tricks of the trade, through sleep interference and so on like this, I was able to get them through it. And even so, they still reflect some of that scars, but you would never know it because it's not physical scars. Okay, so I have gone through it. I was tested. I think that I won the victory one time. Now we'll see if we can win the victory another time. All parents are always guided if one goes within and asks. Many times we go to the wrong sources, and that is where our problems come.
Our children's bodies and the glands that you were having us to rediscover or to understand in ourselves, are they locked up as ours are, and what procedures should we use to maybe help them enhance and to use their
I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
Okay, like you were saying about us men having this hole in the roof of our mouths, in the back of our mouths, because that's so for the young men that are coming up, and what procedure or exercises should we use in order to help to restore the function of these glands or the whole of it, that connects to the gland.
I have not completely mastered that technique. I have experimented with it both when I was younger and occasionally now. I do understand what it helped me to accomplish and what it didn't help me to accomplish in its usage. I would not be a person worthy enough to impart that knowledge because I have not mastered it. Let me, however, say that I have found that the best teacher is within. I found that when I really have something I want to know, after I weigh the opinions of men such as me, I go within in meditation and then in prayer, but meditation first for a solution and an answer. So far, when I follow that first mind, it has been correct.
You also did say instead of solid food, you deal with essence, like is to help stimulate the reactivation of this gland which you have in the top of your mouth. And I put the word essence, and does that mean also like aromas or essence of peppermint or essence of eucalyptus oils or different things?
I didn't say essence of peppermint or eucalyptus, but the essence is yes.
The essence is
just as you state.
Aromas.
Just yes.
So much as
They even have revived now aromatherapy. They're combining that with color enhancement and vibrational sound. That is back to the creation anyway. Light, color, and sound. That is where creation first started.
In this magnetic, we're in the electromagnetic as opposed to...
Okay, let this be, that's about 4 now. Okay.
I had to say in the last 2 lectures that you did there, so I was holding on with this. But this is a question.
Okay, thank you.
You said we descended from magnetic existence into electromagnetic now. And electromagnetic is in existence even in the wilderness where you have no electric or power lines, and if so, can you create a magnetic existence in the wilderness such as Alaska and say you want to go and live, could you create such an existence that it's not bombarded with electromagnetic fields, or would you have to just place your magnets and diodes everywhere where you're at?
That really depends on what is going to happen to those wildernesses and where those wildernesses in your mind are. You referenced Alaska. Let's use that as a fulcrum. In Alaska, there are many things that are happening on a daily basis that are horrendous. They have had earthquakes, some of which, if we only understood what good they did, we would praise them because they destroyed a lot of concentration camps in some of those earthquakes. We have had, and they do presently have, temperatures that are in the 30 below zeros, as it is very close to what is called one of our poles, which by the way don't exist, but close to one of our magnetic grids. And there's going to be a lot of interaction between the 4 elements of Earth there until they balance. So even though they may be free of mankind and humans' interference, you still have to act with nature's rebalancing. All things must have energy, so you're never bereft of some kind of energy, whether it be electrical, magnetic, or organic, which is mind. And if we can only go through that third force, which I kind of mentioned before, the mind force or the orgon energy, the recreative principle, usually they will get us through the other 2 principles. The catch is, it's very hard for one who does not use that discipline and who has any doubt to follow that middle path, the middle pillar, when the opposites are so attractive and so strong and powerful. If you could do that, you could probably exist anywhere on Earth and walk through it. But to do it in a concentric physical reality, to say this guy on the Earth, that this is where I can go and use this, would be very difficult. I would say almost by any means necessary that you can live within spirit will be the way to survive that. You're welcome. Good evening.
I have a question about the 2 female glands that you mentioned.
The 2 female what now? Oh, I'm sorry. 2 female what now?
Female glands.
Glands, okay.
Are they glands?
Were they glands or are they glands?
And the
Parthenogenesis.
Okay, I want to know what the 2 locations are and what can a woman do to stimulate these glands if they are to help prevent the effects of radiation?
Yes. Well, it's somewhat difficult at this time to utilize those glands fully. In some cases, they have been so atrophied and even removed in pan-hysterectomies and total hysterectomies amongst some Earth women that some of them don't even exist anymore. What is interesting, though, every gland has a reality in the left brain and a surreality in the right brain, which means even if the physical organ is gone, the pattern of remembrance is still kept in the analytical left brain and can be brought about through the creative right brain, even if it's not on the physical plane, which means that woman then becomes even more psychic and is able to produce some of those psychic thoughts into physical realities, which means even though that gland is gone for creation, the power now to create in thought and bridge future and past is now given, which is even a better power than what she had before. It's hard to say. By balancing the acid-alkaline balance within the body, by honoring all the glands, by meditation, which can influence any gland in your body and any organ in your body, you may revive that, and if so, you will know it, because in many cases, what they call testosterone and progesterone and these hormones are really not secreted from those glands. They're stimulated by thoughts at night and during the day, which cause these glands to operate. That can still be done if there's still usage there. If not, and they have become spiritual or etheric glands, then you can begin to create on the heavenly planes and even look into the future and prophesy, or go back into the past. So no gifts are ever granted that they're taken away, but we must then use different methods to contact them based on where we are in vibration.
And if I were to visualize,
the Epuparoon in the Mesosphinx, hold on a minute, let me give it to you exactly. The EPOOPHORON is between the uterus and the ovaries, where the two tubes, fallopian tubes go down again, in that little cavity which is called the Mesosphinx. It's now pretty much a vestigial gland, some pride, dehydrated or so, but may be there in some women. It is also the cavity in many cases that some births are made, when they form atypical births, again outside of the tube, as well as in the colon cavity. This is why, because sometimes they still try to regenerate there. Many women who are undergoing now dermoid cyst and just ovarian cysts and so on like this, are still the energies there from that outside that cavity adhering to those tubes because of magnetic flow, and they start to bud, especially if the woman is not balanced per se. And I don't mean balanced in mind, I mean body balance, taking in the wrong foods and essences. The other one is the Parthenogenesis, Paroophon, and this is where the seminal fluid is produced, and it's below the Mesosphinx, right at the bridge of where the colon would start, transverse colon, in the cavity. And let me say again too, in passing, person who's led me on that research by reading more than I could read in the same books that I overlooked was a lady there, my wife, sitting there, and you might want to consult with her. I won't say she's an expert, but she was the first one to draw it to my attention, so she might be able to tell you even more than I.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, and good night. Thank you very much. I appreciate you sharing it with me. Thank you for that. Huh? Oh, you still... The brother still wants that diode experiment again. I don't believe this. Okay. All right. Do we have a volunteer for the diode experiment? Is there someone who wants to use you? All right. Why not? Okay. You guys want to come down there? Yeah, down there again? Okay.
I mean, that's what we say. All the questions.
Here you are, good Dr. Blair. I have some.
Oh, that's okay.
What?
Okay. Okay, that's good enough. Oh, you want me to talk into that? Okay, what we're going to do at this time is a demonstration of the power of diodes, and to explain again once more what diodes do. Diodes align your own body's electromagnetic field energies and make it resistant to enroaching oscillating energies. The body can take energies that come in on an even angle and are evenly spaced and flow. It does not accept well oscillating energies which come in from every which way, which we call radiant energies. Radiant energies weaken us, and if they continue, will even kill us or cause us to look old before our times. Even energies add to our life force, and if we can use it, even make us regenerate. So I want to kind of give a demonstration of that for. I'm using kinesiology as the vehicle of expression for it. Kinesiology is simply muscle flexing and ligament flexing due to pressure. So again, I'm going to ask the gentleman again to extend his arm, his strongest arm, and resist me. He'll feel how hard I'm pushing, how much resistance he has to give. Not yet, we didn't wait again. Then once that is done, I will have him to take a look at or step over or near electrical fields. Then his arm should be very easy to push down, or it will cause a tremendous amount of resistance on his part for the same amount of pressure that I exude. Then I will let him hold the diode and do the same thing again, and see that almost immediately the energy is restored, because he now has not letting any energy dissipate from his body. He's controlled his own energy forces, and then we'll try it again without it. Okay? Right here's good enough. What front face this way. This is good. Strong arm, lock it in. But it's working. Okay. Don't let me push it down. Remember how hard I'm pushing it. Kind of put it all the way over. Okay, fight me. Don't let me move. I'm pushing fairly hard. Okay. You know how much strength you have to use to resist it. Okay, just relax. Let me move. Ready? All right. I want you to step over that line of energy there. And I want you to pull your hand out here. And you look toward that light that's over there. Big beacon light, that little flat light. Okay, I want you to resist me. Don't let me push it down. But fight it. Resist me. Okay. Let me know when you're ready. Ready? See the light, ready? See how much more you're locking your whole arm up. See how much more resistance you're at. I'm not trying to push strength. It's not strength. Right. Okay. I want you to step away from there. What I just do it to you? No, I said it was possible. Okay, let's step back over again. Go down, left hand, hold out your arm. Look over to the light again, resist me. Easy to do? Okay. Okay, again, persist. Alright, reach it again. Same thing again with the light, resist me. Put it on your hand again. The light, resist me. Please drop my hand. Alright, ready? See the difference? Yes, sir. This is almost immediate thing, because to say again, and that was in his right hand. The left hand is your hand of accumulation. You draw in things. In his left hand, he can even begin with enough of these to become superhuman, and let that energy, instead of going negative, become powerful. That's what I don't talk about a lot. This is why I say in the classes we begin to show how you can use it. It's just a matter of using your own energy and using it correctly. Okay. Thank you. All right. Okay.